Everyone, welcome back. This is Amir Suhail, and today we are going through the third chapter of the Ancient Indian History by R.S. Sharma, the old NCERT by R.S. Sharma. And the name of the chapter is Types of Sources and Historical Construction. Now, I've been saying this right from the beginning that this book and especially this chapter are not just important from the perspective of the competitive examinations that all of you have been preparing for, but it also gives you a sense or a basic understanding of how history is written or constructed using different kinds of sources. So let's get started. So the first section of this chapter would be the material remains. Now, these remains could be the stone temples or the brick monasteries, which stand us to remind of the great building activities of the past. But the fact is that a major part of these remains lies buried in the moons scattered all over the country. Now, what the moons? The moons are actually an elevated portion of land covering remains of old habitations. Now, ये moon single culture हो सकते हैं, major culture हो सकते हैं, और multiculture भी हो सकते हैं. Now, let us move uh, here, which says that the science which enables us to dig the old moons in a systematic manner in successive layers and to form an idea of the material life of people is called archaeology, right? सो इसी कड़ी में ये जो एक्सकवेशन का पूरा प्रोसेस है, देयर आर डिफरेंट टेक्निक्स, साइंटिफिक टेक्निक्स ऑफ एक्सकवेटिंग दीज मून्स. तो इन 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 मून्स को एक्सकवेट करते हुए हमें बहुत सारे कल्चर्स की डिस्कवरी हुई है. एंड देन हियर इम्पोर्टेंट वुड बी टू टॉक अबाउट द मेगालिथ्स. So what is interesting is that some people in South India buried along with the dead their tools, weapons, pottery, and other belongings in the graves, okay, which were encircled by big pieces of stone. Now, in structures को megaliths कहा जाता था. So, by digging these megaliths, we have come to learn of the life which people lived in Deccan from the Iron Age onwards. Now, there is another important topic, which is the radiocarbon dating. Now, radiocarbon dating again is a technique of actually dating the things which are found in the excavation process. तो इसमें क्या होगा कि बेसिकली रेडियो कार्बन या फिर कार्बन 14 एक रेडियो एक्टिव आइसोटोप है कार्बन का विच इज प्रेजेंट इन ऑल लिविंग ऑब्जेक्ट्स. तो इट डिकेज लाइक ऑल रेडियो एक्टिव सब्सटेंसेस बट एट अ यूनिफॉर्म रेट. Now, by measuring the loss of C14 content, we can actually date the product which has actually been found in the process of excavation, right? So, the history of climate and vegetation is known through examination of, this is important as well, that now this process, the history of climate and vegetation is known through an examination of plant residues and especially through pollen analysis. So here, radiocarbon dating and the pollen analysis, which is used to basically know the history of the climate and vegetation, are very important, which you'll have to remember. Now, let's move on to the second part, which is the coins. Now, the study of coins is called numismatics, and ancient Indian currency was not issued in the form of paper, as all of you are aware, and it is being used. Yeah, so it was not issued in paper, but as metal coins, right? So, copper. Now, these ancient coins were made of copper, silver, gold, or lead. And copper. Now, how do we know this? It is that कॉइन मोल्ड्स कॉइन के जो सांचे हैं जिनमें इनको बनाया जाता था मेड ऑफ which were made of burnt clay have been discovered in large numbers And most of these coin most of them belong to the Kushan period, that is the first three Christian centuries. Now, the use of these molds in post-Gupta period almost disappears, right? So you will understand this portion in the later part of this chapter when we go there. So we'll discuss this part as to why as to why these molds disappear. Now we have also come across a number of hoards wherein people kept a number of coins. They hoarded them in vessels, and these hoards have actually come about as a very important source of writing history, right? So these hoards, the coins that we have found in these hoards, are not just Indian coins, but इनमें से वैसे कॉइन्स भी हैं जो अब्रॉड से आए हैं सच एज फ्रॉम दी जो रोमन एम्पायर में इशू हुए थे एंड वो भी हमें डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द कंट्री में मिलते हैं. हमारे जो अर्लीस्ट कॉइन्स हैं contain a few symbols, but the later coins mention the name of kings, gods or dates, और areas जहां पे इनको where they are found indicate the region of their circulation, right? Very simple. And then this has enabled us to reconstruct the history of several ruling dynasties, especially the Indo-Greeks who came to India from North Afghanistan and ruled here in the second and first centuries BC. नाउ कुछ कॉइन्स को एज अ डोनेशन भी दिया जाता था, या फिर एज अ मोड ऑफ पेमेंट एंड मीडियम ऑफ एक्सचेंज. सो उनसे हमें वो कॉइन्स एक्चुअली they throw a lot of light on the economic history. Now some coins were issued by the guilds of merchants and goldsmiths with the permission of the rulers, of course, and this shows that crafts and commerce had become important, right? Now we get the largest number of coins in post Maurya times. This is important. And they were made of lead, cotton, copper, bronze, silver, and gold. Now the Guptas issued the largest number of coins made of gold. So all this indicates that trade and commerce flourished, especially in the post Maurya and good part of Gupta times. But the fact that पोस्ट गुप्ता पीरियड में हमें बहुत कम कॉइन मिलते हैं उसका दैट मीन्स दैट ट्रेड and commerce had declined during that period. Now, coins also portray kings as gods, and contain religious symbols and legends, all of which throw light on the art and religion of the time. Now, let's go on to inscriptions. So, the study of the inscriptions is called epigraphy, and the study of old writing used in inscriptions and other old records is called paleography. In inscriptions, the earliest inscriptions were recorded on stone, but in the early centuries of Christian era, copper plates began to be used for this purpose. So the earliest inscriptions were written in Prakrit language, and in the third Prakrit language in the third century BCE, and Sanskrit was adopted as an epigraphic medium in second century AD, which means that it happened very late, and it became widespread during the fourth and fifth centuries. Now, inscriptions began to be composed in regional languages in the ninth and 10th centuries, and most inscriptions bearing on the history of Maurya, post Maurya, and Gupta times have been published in a series of collections called Corpus Inscriptionum Indicarum. The Harappan inscriptions, which await decipherment, seem to have been written in a pictographic script. Okay, now the Ashokan inscriptions were engraved in Brahmi script, which was written from left to right, right? The Brahmi script written from left to right, and but some of the Ashokan inscriptions were also inscribed in the Kharoshthi script, which was written from right to left. However, the Brahmi script prevailed in the whole country except in the northwest part. तो northwest में Greek और Aramaic scripts को यूज किया जाता था Ashokan inscriptions को लिखने में, especially in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Now, Brahmi continued to be the main script till the end of Gupta times. The earliest inscriptions found in the seals of Harappa belong to 2500 BC. They have not been deciphered so far. So जो oldest inscriptions है वो जो अभी तक decipher हुई है वो है अशोका की inscriptions issued in 3rd century BC. So 14th century में दो Ashokan pillar. Now this is interesting that in 14th century when Firoz Shah Tughlaq was the ruler of the Delhi Sultanate, he found two Ashokan pillars. Now one at Meerut and the another at a place called Topra in Haryana. So उसने दोनों pillars को Delhi लाया and he asked the Pandits who were proficient in Sanskrit, he asked them to decipher the inscriptions, but though the Pandits were not able to do so. नाउ यही डिफिकल्टी आती है ब्रिटिश हिस्टोरियंस या फिर जो ब्रिटिश स्कॉलर्स थे उनको भी लास्ट क्वार्टर ऑफ 18th सेंचुरी में अशोकन इंस्क्रिप्शंस को डिसाइफर करने में और ये जो एपिग्राफ्स थे वो फर्स्ट डिसाइफर होते हैं 1837 में एंड हु वाज द वन हु डिसाइफर्ड देम इट वाज जेम्स प्रिंसेप ही वाज अ सिविल सर्वेंट इन द एम्प्लॉय ऑफ ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी इन बंगाल सो इंस्क्रिप्शंस काफी टाइप की होती है एंड वन ऑफ देम इज द इज कॉल्ड द यूलॉजी जिसमें किंग की एट्रीब्यूट्स को बहुत बड़ा चढ़ा के बोला जाता है या फिर उनकी सिर्फ अच्छाइयों को या फिर अचीवमेंट्स को लिखा जाता है और फेलियर्स को कंप्लीटली एलिमिनेट किया जाता है सो इलाहाबाद की इंस्क्रिप्शन इलाहाबाद इंस्क्रिप्शन ऑफ समुद्रगुप्त व्हिच इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट falls in this category. It is also called as prashasti. And then after the inscriptions, let's move on to the literary sources. So, although the ancient Indians knew writing as early as 2500 BC, our most ancient manuscripts are not older than 4th century AD and have been found in Central Asia. So, although old Sanskrit manuscripts are found all over the country, they mostly belong to South India, Kashmir, and Nepal. नाउ इसमें जो मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट्स है या फिर जो हमारा लिटरेरी सोर्सेज है उनमें रिलीजियस लिटरेचर इज हैज टू बी द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट और रिलीजियस लिटरेचर ऑफ द हिंदूज इंक्लूड्स द वेदास द रामायण एंड द महाभारत एंड द पुराणास एटसेट्रा and in order to understand so the vedas or the four vedas are the earliest of the literary sources or the earliest texts written we can say in the history of mankind so in order to understand the Vedic texts, it was necessary to learn the Vedangas or the limbs of the Vedas. Now, these supplements of the Veda comprised phonetics, phonetics is Shiksha, ritual Kalpa, grammar is Vyakarana, and etymology is Nirukta, and matrix is Chand, and astronomy is Jyotish. So the most famous example of this writing is the grammar of Panini. And grammar of Panini is written around 400 BC और इस टेक्स्ट में ना सिर्फ ग्रामर के रूल्स को इलस्ट्रेट किया गया है बट पनीनी also throws invaluable light on the society economy and culture of the times now the two epics and the major and the major puranas seem to have been finally compiled by circa AD 400 so Mahabharata which was compiled by sage Vedvyas 10th century BC to 4th century AD and then Ramayana, which was compiled by sage, has been attributed to sage Valmiki. And now, after and in the post Vedic period, now in the post Vedic period, big public sacrifices meant for princes and men of substance belonging to the three higher varnas are laid down in Saruta Sutras now which provide for several pompous royal coronations. Now, so Saruta Sutras are the texts wherein pompous royal coronations are prescribed or elaborated. Then we have the Griha Sutras. Griha Sutras belong to circa 600 to 300 BCE. Now, Griha Sutras contain the domestic rituals and then Then we have the third kind, which is the Sulva Sutras, which prescribe various kinds of measurements for the construction of sacrificial altars. Right now, the Sulva Sutras mark the beginning of the study of geometry and mathematics. Okay. So the earliest, now let's move on to Buddhist literature. So the earliest Buddhist texts were written in the Pali language, which was spoken in Magad or South Bihar. They were finally compiled in the 2nd century BC in Sri Lanka. The most important and interesting portion of the non-canonical literature is provided by the stories of the previous births of Gautam Buddha. So Gautam Buddha की previous birth stories को जातक्स कहा जाता है. Now each story, because see, Gautam Buddha passed through more than it is believed that Gautam Buddha, that before Gautam Buddha was finally born as Gautama, he passed through more than 550 births, and in many cases in the form of animals. Now each birth story is called a jatak, which is a folk tale. Okay, so these jataks throw invaluable light on social and economic conditions ranging from 5th to 2nd century BC. Uh, they also make incidental references to political events in the age of Buddha. Now, the Jain texts, let's move on to Jain literature. Jain texts were written in Prakrit and were finally compiled in the 6th century AD in Vallabhi and Gujarat. So then, uh, Jain text chief characteristic of these texts is that they refer repeatedly to trade and traders. Now, in the category of secular literature, we have the Dharma Sutras and Smritis, which together with their commentaries are called the Dharma Shastras. The Dharma Shastras were compiled in 500 to 200 BC. Another important law book is the Arthashastra of Kautilya, which is divided into 15 books. Now, book second or book third को earlier date का माना जाता है. So ये book, it is attributed to Chanakya, who was the minister at the court of Chandragupta Maurya. और हमारे पास now it is a very important text of statecraft. So we also possess the works of Bhash, Shudra, Kalidas, and Banabhat. The works of Kalidas comprise kavyas and dramas, and the most important and the most important or the famous of which is the Abhijanana Shakuntalam. In addition to Sanskrit sources, we have some of the earliest Tamil texts found in the corpus of Sangam literature. और ये जो टेक्स्ट थी इनको प्रोड्यूस किया जाता है ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ 3 to 4 centuries बाय पोएट्स जो असेंबल हुए थे कॉलेजेस में विच वर पेट्रोनाइज्ड बाय चीफ्स एंड किंग्स. नाउ इन कॉलेजेस को संगम कहा जाता है. Sangam kaha jata tha, and that's why the literature produced in these assemblies is known as the Sangam literature. Now, Sangam literature comprises about 30,000 lines of poetry, which are arranged in 8 anthologies called Atutukai, and the poems are collected in groups of hundreds, such as Parunanuru, and the 400 of now there are two main groups, which is the Patinenakil Kanaku and the 18 lower collections, and the Patu Patu, which means the 10 songs. Now, the basically the Sangam texts refer mainly to settlements including Kavaripatnam, whose flourishing existence is now attested archaeologically. They also speak of the Yavanas coming in their own vessels, purchasing pepper with gold and supplying wine and women slave to the natives. Now, you must remember that the foreigners who came to trade were called as the Yavanas in the Sangam texts. Now, foreign accounts, the Greek, Roman, and Chinese visitors, either as travelers or religious converts, and they left behind accounts of the things as they saw. Now, what is interesting is that Alexander's invasion does not find any mention in Indian sources, but Alexander का invasion entirely उसके बारे में जो mention है वो हमें entirely in Greek sources में मिलता है. And now the Greek writers, and they also provide us valuable information about India. So the Greek writers mention Sandrocotus, a contemporary of Alexander the Great, who invaded India in 326 BC. Now, Prince Sandrocotus is identified with Chandragupta Maurya, whose date of accession is fixed at 322 BC. Now, ये जो date in इस Chandragupta Maurya की date in Greek sources से हमें मिलता है. Now, this is very important, and it has served as a sheet anchor. This is what R.S. Sharma writes, that it has served as a sheet anchor in ancient Indian archaeology. Now, another important text is the Indica of Megasthenes, who came to the court of Chandragupta Maurya. But this text is not preserved in entirety, and it's basically found in fragments and has been quoted by the subsequent classical writers. Another text is the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea and Ptolemy's Geography. Periplus of the Erythraean Sea was written in around AD 80 to 115 by an anonymous writer, and then Ptolemy's Geography was written in 150 AD. Then we have the Pliny's Naturalis Historia, which belongs to the first century AD and was written in Latin and tells us about trade between India and Italy. And Periplus or Erythraean Sea describes the Roman trade in the Red Sea, Persian Gulf, and Indian Ocean. So the Chinese travelers, now, out of the Chinese travelers used to come to India, and Fahian and Hyun Sang are the most important of them. Now, both of them were Buddhists who came to this country to visit the Buddhist shrines and to study Buddhism. First one, that is Fahian, came during the time of Chandragupta II, who was the Gupta emperor, whereas Hyun Sang came during the time of Harsha, which was in the 7th century AD. Now, historical sense. Now this is one of the acquisitions that has been leveled by the colonial historians, that the Indians did not have a historical sense. But if we look at our Puranas, which are 18 in number, though encyclopedic in contents, the Puranas provide dynastic history up to the beginning of the Gupta rule. Then the Puranas speak of four ages called Krita, Trita, Dwapara, and Kali. Importance of time and place, vital elements in history is indicated. We also have the Vikram Samvat, which begins in 57 BC, then the Shaka Samvat in AD 78, and the Gupta era in AD 319. Now, during the 3rd century BC, Ashokan inscriptions show considerable historical sense. Ashok ruled for 37 years. His inscriptions record events that happened from the 8th to the early 17th regnal year. Similarly, in the 1st century BC, Kharvel of Kaling records a good many events of his life year-wise in the Hathigum inscription. Now, the Indians also display considerable historical sense in biographical writings. A good example is the composition of Harsh Charitra by Banabhat in the 7th century AD. It is a semi-biographical work written in Ornate style, which was kind of imitated by the later chroniclers. It describes the early career of Harshvardhan, although full of okay. Well, let's not go into this now. So basically, the conclusion, to conclude, you can say that all this discussion kind of drives home the point that Indians did have a historical sense, and this is the point that R.S. Sharma is trying to make in this chapter. And I'm sure, and I'm hopeful that after going through all the kinds of sources that are used by historians to construct history, it has given you a basic sense and kind of laid that platform for your understanding as to how history is written, and as to how as to what are the kinds of materials or evidence which is used in this process. Thank you.